I would like to thank both Rania Andonopoulos and Dimitri Papadimitriou. And we would now like to welcome, with Ilias Kikilias, who stays on the panel with me, we would like to welcome to the panel Sofia Adam, researcher at the Observatory of Social and Economic Developments at the General Confederation of Greek Workers, and Andreas Stefanidis, the president of the Federation of Hellenic Association of Young Entrepreneurs, who will be the main speakers for the final part of this session. And Ilias will respond again, along with Haris Makriniotis, the managing director of Endeavour Greece.
Okay. I am an outlier, as you can see, because I'm going to talk about social economy and social enterprises, and this has nothing to do with what has been heard so far. It was mostly market, corporations, and stuff like that. Hopefully, I will just be last but not least. So, my presentation is going to be strongly policy-oriented. Which means that I will try to communicate some of the agonies that have been expressed by people striving to create social enterprises in Greece. And in doing such, I would like really to emphasize the policy dimension, because up to now in the conference I noticed that there is a tendency to somehow objectify policies. For example, it was heard in the beginning that there's not going to be a domestic stimulus in the economy, as if that is not the end result of specific policy implementation, which is named internal devaluation. So, to cut the... it's this, right? We might be having a problem with... No? Okay, so it's working. Thank you. So, the objectives now, again. First of all, is to define social economy and social entrepreneurship, because I would really like to have a common jargon when it comes to these issues, because the international bibliography has noticed that the US audience and the European audience is kind of different when using these terms. So given that I have the chance from Niarchos Foundation to present something to a US audience, I would really like to clarify these terms. And then I would like to describe the legal and institutional framework concerning social entrepreneurship in Greece, and identify deficiencies, gaps, and inconsistencies which unfortunately do not allow for the potential of this sector to deliver on its premises. And finally, provide some policy insights. What I will not do is to describe once again the gloomy picture of unemployment in Greece, because I believe that this has been successfully done, to say the least, by Rania Andonopoulos before. So I think that all these numbers of like 1,350,000 unemployed people are still floating in our head, hopefully, and we don't forget that. And neither I will try to, nor I will try to portray a great idealized vision about social enterprises. So it's going to be a middle ground gray zone between the two. Okay. So what I'm trying to describe with this triangle, which is based on the work of a great theoretician named Karl Polanyi, is that what we refer to as social economy is a universe of practices that cannot be, strictly speaking, defined as neither public nor private. What we are talking about is practices like cooperatives, mutual societies, social enterprises, as we will see, that they are in the center of the intersection and interaction of different logics. And by saying that, we have to acknowledge that in everyday society, we don't only have the impersonal market transactions. What Polanyi was really clever in identifying is that even capitalism is not only based on impersonal market transactions, that there are other operating logics, such as the redistribution performed by the state and the mutuality affected by everyday community relations. So, social economy practices develop in the intersection of these different operating logics and to some extent are in tension with these different forms. What I wanted to say before about the different jargon was actually that in the US you mostly find the term non-profit sector, third sector, but not so much the term of social economy. And that has to do, among other reasons, with the historical trajectory and the focus on philanthropy and charity when it goes to the US, in contrast with the large historical cooperative movement in Europe. Not that there are no cooperatives in the US now, don't let me be misunderstood, but it's a different historical trajectory. Now let's try to define social enterprises. And here lies one big difference between the US and Europe. For the US, social enterprises are a phenomenon that started to develop when the non-profit organizations were not able to secure funding from the government. When the non-profit organizations started to feel this constraint, they have started to move towards the market in order to secure some income. And this process is defined in the US as the phenomenon of social entrepreneurship. So, for the US audience, social enterprises are in a continuum where from one hand we have the NPOs which start to develop market-driven activities, and on the other hand we have a traditional for-profit. For the European audience, however, there is a clear-cut difference. Social enterprises belong to the heart of social economy, and specifically they try to combine and bring together two different families of organizations. On the one hand, we have what we call the evolution of cooperatives. That is, from the 70s onward, we start to have cooperatives that they do not strive to benefit only their members, but they strive to benefit society in general. That is, they try to affect positively other constituencies apart from the members of the co-op itself. The other group of organizations that have been in the origin of the social entrepreneurship movement in Europe is what we call non-profit organizations which gradually started to develop productive activities. Why is that so? Because NPOs, after one point, realized that we cannot only advocate for the right of people not to be socially excluded, we have to find mechanisms to alter their status of social exclusion. And in order to do so, they started to develop productive activities. So these two families together have created the phenomenon of social enterprises in Europe. So, if we were, and this is largely based on the work of the MS network on social economy, if we were trying to define a social enterprise, an ideal type, then we would have a number of economic criteria and a number of social criteria. Going to the economic criteria, we have a continuous productive activity. That means that a social enterprise is not a bazaar where people sell small gifts produced for Christmas. It is an entity that has a continuous productive activity. Second, it has a high degree of autonomy. That means that the decisions are based on the group itself and they're not coming from state bureaucracy or from the market. Third, there is a significant economic risk. That means that a social enterprise, by entering the market, is facing the challenges of the market. And fourth, there is a minimum paid work. This criterion is used to differentiate social enterprises from a voluntary organization. And now going to the social criteria, first of all, we have to identify the collective character. So, the tradition of social enterprises in Europe really highlights the fact that they are collective initiatives. Second, the decision-making procedure is not based on capital ownership. So, no matter how many shares you have in the social enterprise, we usually apply the rule one person, one vote. There is a participatory decision-making process that is normally a general assembly where people vote on what will be the course of activity of the social enterprise, and there is limited profit distribution. And this is something that I would like to stay a little bit further. In contrast with the non-profit organizations, the main issue with social enterprises is that they do not, it's not that they do not share profits. It's the fact that they pose a sort of limitation on the percentage of profit that can be distributed. And finally, there is an explicit aim to benefit the community. You cannot be a social enterprise if there is something, if there is nothing social about your productive activity. Now, what happened in Greece? With law 4019 in 2011, Greece adopted for the first time a legal framework for social enterprises. What this law is doing is that it identifies 3 types of social enterprises. First of all, we have social enterprises for integration, that they are addressing vulnerable social groups, and they have to be to consist of 40% of their workers should be from vulnerable social groups. We have the second type of social cooperative enterprises, which are addressing the issue of social welfare, that is, they are providing social welfare services. And the third type, which are of what could be defined as general or productive activities. This law envisages a certain number of provisions having to do with what is the minimum number of members required to have a social enterprise, what is a required startup capital, how many obligatory and supplementary shares one can get, what are the exact voting rights, and how they can be distributed along the shares one has, what will be the management structure, what are the limits on profit distribution, and what is the liability exposure of each member. Let me just highlight in terms of that the law correctly envisages the collective dimension, because a social cooperative enterprise cannot consist of less than 5 members. There is the cooperative principle of one person, one vote, regardless of the number of shares, and there is also a limitation on the scale of profit distribution. That is, 5% is reserved, 35% is distributed to employees, and 60% is reinvested to the social enterprise itself. Now, since the law was adopted, and just to give you an indicative example, in all this situation of distraction that has been described by the presentation so far, there was an expanding sector of social enterprises in Greece during the crisis. For example, in October 2013, there were 236 social enterprises, and now in March 2014, there are 415. So it's more than double in a little bit more than 1 year. Why is this so? What does the registry show? First of all, most of the social enterprises have been created in Athens to the detriment of a regional equality that we would like to see, especially when we're talking about social economy enterprises that have to be local and address local problems. Second, we mentioned 3 types of social enterprises, and we see that what is being created is mostly of the third type, that is, the general and productive activities. We don't have enough development in the first type, which is the work integration social enterprises. We don't have a big development in social enterprises for social services, for welfare services. That has to do a lot with how social enterprises have been supported by the Greek government. And let me go on that. If we would like to define how the Greek government addressed the issue of social entrepreneurship in Greece, we would say that it is highly inconsistent. First of all, the register of the social enterprises, we don't have a unified register of social economy organizations in Greece. I know that it's now a joke to talk about Greek statistics, but it's really necessary to have a uniform register of what is going on in the sector. Second, initially, the laws said that there were going to be a tax. There were going to be no taxes for the percentage of profit that is reinvested in the enterprise, and then subsequently decided to place taxes on social enterprises. I'm not here to defend that social enterprises should not be taxed at all. What I'm trying to say is that when you do start up a social enterprise, it's good to know what's going to happen with the taxes. So this type of inconsistencies seriously block and hinder any potential development in this category. Yes. The same goes with the issue of social insurance contributions. People were told that by becoming members of a social enterprise, they are not obliged to register as self-employed. Then the fund of self-employed people decided that they should be insured as self-employed, and then that was again suspended and they were declared free of social security contributions. Now we have a series of relations with the public sector that have not been defined yet, and that refers to funding, where no funding mechanism explicitly exists up to now for social enterprises. We don't have a clear institutional framework concerning programmatic agreements between the government in different levels and social enterprises. We don't have an institutional framework on how the public could procure products and services from social enterprises by taking into consideration their social character, and the coordinating agency for the social economy sector was suspended for at least 1 year. I will not go into detail on the strategic plan for social economy and social entrepreneurship because it has never materialized in Greece. So we are expecting a number of stimulus, but nothing has happened so far. I will just finish now and conclude with some policy suggestions if we really if the Greek government is really interested in trying to exploit positively this boom in social enterprise formation. First of all, there has to be a development of regional support structures. Regional support structures that they will try to assist people in their efforts to develop social enterprises with a local character. There has to be a stimulus specifically for type 1 social enterprises that they address people from vulnerable social groups, because this is the category that finds the most important obstacles when it comes to registering, to access to funding and loans. It is also important to identify local social needs where social enterprises can thrive. What we have observed so far is that because social enterprises develop on the unassisted efforts of the members themselves, they tend to focus and concentrate in the same sectors. So we have a lot of social enterprises, for example, in types of like in the food industry, and we don't have diversification, which is to the detriment of the social enterprises themselves. And I would like to finish with the huge need of developing alternative funding mechanisms, and this necessitates a new structure of the cooperative banking sector and social funding and social investing mechanism, which up to now go largely unnoticed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now I would like to ask Mr. Andreas Stefanidis to give us his main speech on the topic of youth entrepreneurship.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank the Stavros Niarchos Foundation for the honor, on behalf of the Federation of Young Entrepreneurs, to be amongst the speakers today with all the distinguished speakers, panelists, and participants of this very serious conference. I will try to be very short on time because it seems that I'm the last keynote speaker. A brief history of our federation. We started almost 14 years ago in 2001, 25th of June 2001. And now we have 9 regional associations of young entrepreneurs. We don't focus only on startups. Our focus is on the young entrepreneurs by age, either if they are self-employed, if they have a family business, if they are social entrepreneurs. So the age limit for the regional association is 43, for the federation is 45 years old. Our vision is to go until the 13th regions of Greece. We don't need more than that. We want not just the young entrepreneurs to be involved of the local chapters, but also to be participatory citizens to support the specific regional needs and challenges that they have at regional level. Now, since 2001, we are a member of the European Confederation of Young Entrepreneurs, and since 2007, we are the host organization of the Global Entrepreneurship Week. What was the reason for that? We would like to support the extroversion of young entrepreneurs, any type of businesses. However, it was very, very difficult the last 14 years because the majority, as you will see from the research later on, of the businesses in Greece, they follow the internal national business model. No, it's okay. On the 17 to 23 of November of 2014, we ran for the 7th year the Global Entrepreneurship Week in Greece. Our role is to create coalitions with private players and public players to support the change of mindset, because the Global Entrepreneurship Week connects us with more than 153 ecosystems all over the globe. 10 days ago, we came back with 10 young entrepreneurs from Moscow because we have the Global Entrepreneurship Congress, and it was important for those people not just to make contacts and network for their own business, but to bring the contacts and share with other young entrepreneurs at national level and give them the mindset what is needed for the future and what will not be success in the future. So it's important not to spend any more money, but also not to spend time in those elements that they will not create value, will not give exports on the macroeconomics level. Now, in order to boost the networking with the 153 countries, the following 2 months,